So we've been homesteading for almost 10 years now, and we have made pretty much every mistake in the book. Grab something warm or cool to drink, have a seat, and I'll tell you all about it. So homesteading was a huge dream for my husband and I, pretty much the day we bought our property. I started dreaming of compost piles and chickens and how we could grow food and be productive. And so it was something we set our sights on right from the beginning. And if you want to know our whole homestead story, I'll link to a post on the blog where you can read all of the background to how we got into this crazy lifestyle. But today I want to focus on the top 5 mistakes we made when we were starting out. We were young, we didn't have a lot of money, we had a lot of passion, and we kind of just attacked this lifestyle with full force, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but it gave us some not so awesome results in the process. So hopefully by listening to this video today, you can learn from our mistakes and you won't have to repeat them yourself. So mistake number 1 that we made when we started our homesteading journey was not building things right at the beginning. So I'm a pretty frugal person, and back in the day I used to be pretty extreme in my frugality, to the point where if I could save a penny or cut a corner to save some cash, I would do it. Now, sometimes that's awesome, and my frugality went a long way in helping us get out of debt and save money and all that good stuff, but sometimes frugality can actually cost you money in the long run, especially when it comes to building homestead projects. Case in point, barbed wire. So we had a lot of fence to build on this property. The whole thing was just tumble down and broken and ancient. And so one of the first projects we tackled was redoing the fence because we had animals. And so we went to the local farm store, and barbed wire is expensive if you get the good stuff. So I thought, why not get the cheap stuff, right? It's all the same. Barbed wire is barbed wire. Not so much. So we got our cheap rolls of barbed wire, started to stretch it tight, and put our fence together, and we realized pretty quickly that the cheap barbed wire breaks when you stretch it. The quality just isn't there. And so we actually ended up building those fences again a year or 2 down the road, after we went to all the work at the beginning, putting them up. And that was one of many hard lessons that we learned, that cheap materials aren't always better. So as you are starting to build the infrastructure for your homestead or update what you already have, remember that sometimes it's better just to wait a little bit longer, save a little bit more, and get the good stuff so you can build quality right from the beginning. So mistake number 2 that we made in our homesteading journey also has to do with money, and it would be that we thought that homesteading would save us lots of money. Again, this was my frugal self talking, and I had these visions of a milk cow or chickens or homegrown meat saving us millions of dollars in grocery bills, and our budget would never be the same. Well, our budget was never the same, but it wasn't quite in the way that I was expecting. Homesteading, contrary to popular belief, actually costs money. And when you think about it and really break down the numbers, a lot of times growing your own food, especially things like dairy or eggs, actually cost more than a grocery store. And that's a little bit disappointing if you're having visions of free milk. Now, all is not lost, and I'm not trying to discourage you from getting animals or adding food production into your homestead goals, because it's still really worthwhile. And you have to keep in mind that you're also getting quality of life, experiences for your kids, skills that you're learning, and a much, much higher quality food product. So for example, our milk cow cost us about $2,000. And she eats a lot of hay every year when the summertime pastures dry up. So the food that we feed her and the expenses that she brings into our budget definitely cost more than me just going to the store every week and buying a gallon of milk. But we're getting raw milk, it's high quality, we get all the cream, we get as much as we want, and so there is a trade-off there. But I caution you to not be like us and come into homesteading expecting it to be much, much cheaper or to save you lots of money, because that's just not always the case. Now, there are a few things where that is true, right? Vegetable gardening often will save you money. Seeds are inexpensive and you can get a lot of bang for your buck from a little packet of seeds. So that's one area that can really be frugal. But some areas aren't, so just be sure you're watching your budget and paying attention to your expenses so you don't have any surprises at the end of the month. Mistake number 3 is that we did not plan very well or think big enough at the beginning when we first started imagining what our homestead would be. All we could see at the time was what was right in front of us, and so our layouts and our planning and our building reflected that. Now, it wasn't all bad, and we still are using some of the same things we built 10 years ago, but when Christian and I look back at our very, very limited vision at the time, we kind of kick ourselves for not thinking bigger. So let me give you an example that's a little bit embarrassing. There was a tree row and a fence line behind our house. It's still there. And when we first moved in, we just built it right on the edge of our yard. And that was fine. We put some trees out there. It was good. But then a year or two later, we realized, oh my gosh, we want a bigger yard. Why did we build this tiny little border around a house that's sitting on 60 plus acres? This is silly. So we tore down the fence and moved it out. A lot of work that we had to redo just because of bad planning. But that's not the end of my embarrassing story. We actually did it again a couple years later when we realized we even wanted more room for our trees. So, case in point, that was 2 fence line moves that were a lot of work and a lot of sweat that we could have avoided if we would have just thought bigger in the beginning. So mistake number 4 that I wish we would have steered a little bit further away from when we started our homesteading journey was comparison. Now, it's super easy to get caught up in comparison. I don't care if it's with the person next door or the person on Instagram or Facebook or wherever, but when you start comparing yourself to others, it really gets in your head and can cause you to get completely off track with what you're doing. And I know that I really struggled with that at the beginning, especially when I would look at different books, especially books about off-grid people who were like figuring out how to refrigerate their food without electricity, and they had root cellars, and they had all this amazing infrastructure that was completely electricity free. And even though I didn't really want to go electricity free, I got so distracted by that I wasn't able to focus on what was in front of me because I was worried about cooling my milk without refrigeration. Now, if that's what you want to do, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but that really wasn't priority for me at the time. It just got in my head because I was comparing myself with others. And so I caution all beginning homesteaders, there's such a wide variety of styles and ways you can do this lifestyle. Stay on your own path, stay in your lane, and just enjoy the process where you are. Don't worry about what the other ones are doing. And mistake number 5 was that we tried to do all the things all at the same time, which, as most people know, is a recipe for insanity. So when we bought this property, it was a major fixer-upper and needed basically every square inch of it to be repainted, re-roofed, re-sided, re-fenced, tons of trash to haul away. There was a million things to do, and we really dove in a little bit too aggressively and tried to do all of it at the same time. And that's a recipe for burnout. And I remember back in those days feeling like my heart was pounding all the time. I had a hard time just being and appreciating what we had because I was always looking at what we had to do still, and it just was a lot of stress. So if you're brand new to a homestead, or you're looking at building one or buying one or fixing up the one you have, I really encourage you to focus on one piece at a time. Master it, do it well, finish it, and then move on to the next. One more little bonus tip. Now, this isn't a mistake that Christian and I made just because we kind of have the opposite personality. We dive into things sometimes a little too fast, which sometimes is good, sometimes not so much. But something that I see really paralyzing people is waiting for the perfect time to homestead, or to buy the property, or to get the chickens, or to get the milk cow. And I call this paralysis by analysis. And I get dozens of emails and direct messages and comments from people who tell me, you know, I can't wait to homestead, but I'm just waiting another 5 years till I'm ready. Or I'm so excited to get my first cow, I'm just gonna wait another 3 years until I research it completely. And I'm not discouraging folks from making educated decisions or making sure that they feel confident and sure in what they're stepping into. But it's really, really easy for procrastination to mask itself in perfectionism. And then before we know it, it's 20 years later and we still haven't done the thing that we've been dreaming about. So I encourage you to do your research, make smart decisions, plan accordingly, but then you just gotta dive in and make it happen. And there's always gonna be that little element of fear and the unknown and getting out of your comfort zone, but I think that's where the magic happens. And that, my friends, was our top 5 homesteading mistakes. Now, I'm sure I am going to have plenty more to add to this list as time goes on. I still mess things up on a regular basis, whether it's the poisoned mulch I put in my garden. I'll link to that video. You can get that story in the show notes. Or that time I blew up the blueberry kefir in my kitchen and it looked like a murder scene. So, here's what I want you to do. I want you to leave me a comment below and let me know the #1 mistake that you've made as a homesteader and how you have learned from it. Because mistakes are really how we grow as people and as homesteaders, and it's always fun to be able to learn from someone else's lesson rather than to have to repeat everything ourselves. That's it, guys. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when we post a new video every week. See you next time.